21, Thursday, and I would like the city manager to share what we were in closed session.
Thank you, Mayor Agramonte. Council, we held a closed session and got additional direction from council, but there's no public announcement at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And what am I doing now? Okay, pledge. Oh, I think the first thing I would like is a pledge of allegiance. I see that beaming, smiling face, Richard Dale. Could you please lead us in a pledge?
I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. May I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Cook, Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Cook is absent at this time. Councilmember Henley. Here. Vice Mayor Harrington. Present. Mayor Agramonte.
Well, it looks like we already have had our report on the closed session. Thank you. Could I have someone, while I'm opening up my device, I've learned to call it, approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda. Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Cook. Councilmember Henley.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington. Aye. Mayor Agramonte.
Aye,
Thank
and
you.
I think Councilmember Cook will be here. He's at a meeting and he's running late. I think he is at the GSA?
That's correct. He's at another public
Which is
meeting
a very
representing the city.
Important meeting, so I'm happy that he's there, but I'd rather he be here. So, let's see. Okay, so at this point, I'm bringing it out to the public for public comment, and I think I should read this. At this time, members of the public would you like to read that? Yes, you may.
At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon the council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged by the mayor, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone. Begin by spelling your name.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Brown.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Ken Brown, 1396 Lubeck Street in the town of Sonoma. Affordable housing. It's not getting any better, and we're relying on you to make it better. Some of you are renters. It's hard in the city of Sonoma to be a renter. Cannabis. It's another issue that troubles the council, but we are staying strong, and we will continue to promote a medical cannabis dispensary with delivery service for the city of Sonoma. The patients and the citizens deserve it. It's interesting tonight, being Parks and Recreation Month. I want to talk about the swimming pool. It's still ongoing. We are selling our property on Verano and hope to take that money and invest it in a pool somewhere else. The city has gratefully signed on for scholarships for the pool, and we hope that we continue to work with the city on that project. Last night on the plaza, it was a powerful demonstration of citizen power. I feel secure that in the city of Sonoma, I could show up and speak my mind and not have to be acquiescent to the president's plan. we'll see how that goes as it develops. Did I mention General Vallejo?
No, sir.
So I'm bringing forward to the tree committee, figure get started on Arbor Day 2019 now. Get a discussion started on what kind of tree would work near the general to provide some much needed shade for the citizens to enjoy the statue. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Speaking of General Vallejo, Robert Demler, First Street West, Sonoma, registered voter, Sonoma. Madam Mayor, good evening, and council. May I please invite my 3 colleagues from the Vallejo Monument Committee to join me here?
Well, I believe as the meetings run, there's room for 1 speaker, but you certainly can invite people.
They're
up.
not going to speak.
Okay,
I just
that's why
want
I'm
them
saying
here
that.
for comfort.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Thank you. Dr. Peter Meyerhoff, Sean Bellick, and Martin Laney. Gina Kuklis is in New Orleans, and Martha McGettigan is in Santa Cruz. Her brother died. I have a surprise presentation that I'd like to make, since it's a year this coming weekend that we installed a statue that has become a great symbol, an icon of Sonoma, and many of us enjoy it. We had a great deal of help from the city staff. And therefore, we'd like to present through the council this maquette made by Jim Callahan, our sculptor, to the city staff. I'm very happy that Catherine is here tonight because she gave us a lot of good help. So I'd like to present it to our city manager, if you will allow her to come up. I won't let her speak, and I will watch the red light. And may I respectfully suggest, and you know I have a perverse sense of humor, that you put this on that big round table because that's where we got the most flack from anyone in this entire process from the CFA.
We're happy to submit. On behalf of the city, happy to submit. Happy to accept this. Thank you. Thank
It's
you
on.
very much. It's heavy. We'll put it right here so it can be seen. Thank you, it's beautiful.
Thank you. I will close the public session. At this point, do we have any meeting dedications for anyone? All right, well, I have a meeting dedication for Dick Grunt, who is a gentleman deceased. He was a teacher in the school district, I believe it was elementary school. His wife, he leaves behind his wife Marilyn and a son Tim. Dick, as I said, was a teacher here, long heralded as a very wonderful teacher in the school district, and we're just sad to see him go. I met him a few times, and he was a really great guy. So I just wanted to dedicate this meeting to Mr. Grunt. And let's see, presentations. The city manager.
So I actually would like to invite Mrs. Swanson with the Sonoma Valley High School to come forward. And I'd also like to ask, she will do some introductions and overview of this program. This is the city's second year of supporting the Youth Engagement Seminar. I want to recognize that this idea came out of Vice Mayor Harrington when she joined the council, wanted a youth commission, and really wanted to figure out how do we take our youth and get them to be engaged and learn more and really get involved in our community. And so this kind of seminar is what one of the pieces that it evolved from. So I want to thank Vice Mayor Harrington for her idea and creativity.
I'd like to thank you as well.
I also want to acknowledge that the high school has been really quite entrepreneurial in putting this together, the second year, and so I'll let Wendy Swanson, who is the leader, and talk about the program and introduce her youth, and maybe we can take a picture with the council when we're done here.
Thank you, Kathy, and members of the City Council. This is, as Kathy said, our second year doing this. Last year, we had this thought that we should do something with youth and some sort of a civics and community lesson for youth in the Valley. And so the city, the high school, the chamber, and with the financial support of the Ed Foundation, came up with this idea of a program. We sort of threw it together and came up with 2 weeks of really learning about leadership, civic responsibility, coalition building, community building, how to get one's message across, how to do it effectively, how to plan some events for youth in town and get youth more involved in their community. So I would like them all to stand up. This year we have 22. They're not all here tonight. Some are working jobs or things. The Ed Foundation brought them their very cool polo shirts. I don't know if you want them individually named, but we've all been practicing saying our names out loud and introducing ourselves, so I'm going to let them do that very quickly. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I'm Aurora. Melissa. Melina. Tanya. I'm Bella.
I'm Christopher.
I'm Carmen. I'm Vanessa. I'm Catherine. I'm Tammy.
I'm Chris.
I'm Nathan.
Great, so that's about half of our group, and they're all either sophomores, juniors, or seniors next year at Sonoma Valley High School. If anyone in the community would like to see them in action, tomorrow we've been working with the council members and city staff on developing a mock council meeting that the students are going to do tomorrow from 10 to 12 here in the room. They've already picked their issues. We're going to do 2 different sessions. One will be involving affordable housing. So, Ken, it's right in line with your comment. And then also talking about the safety, particularly the crosswalk safety in front of the high school. So, anyways, the 2018 Youth Engagement Seminar. And Liza and Benny.
Once you come up, Wendy and the team, please come on up and let's take a picture with the council, and thank you for being here. Colleen and Kat will take pictures.
You taking it your phone? Yep, of course. Mine too.
All right. Let me get the right angle. Do you all want? Sorry. Yeah. That might help. I think I can get it. All right. Ready? I'm gonna count to 3. Yes. 1, 2, 3. Cheese.
And Jane Fonda suggests say money.
Okay. I can do that. One more. Let's do it then. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, money. All right. There you go.
Just to make a quick comment, this morning when the mayor and I met with the youth engagement seminar, we asked them, did anyone want to run for office ever? And 2 of them said yes, they did. And another one said that she wanted to be a civil engineer working in government. And so I hope that more of them also want to do that. But we may have, our next council members, because some of these kids are going to turn 18. So I'm very excited about that.
Read a proclamation for the National Parks and Recreation Month, July 2018, and I would imagine that's why these gentlemen are here. Thank you for being here. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout this country, including Sonoma, and whereas our parks and recreation are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region, and whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas Sonoma recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources. Now therefore be it proclaimed, I, Mayor Madeline Agramani, do hereby designate July as Parks and Recreation Month in Sonoma, in witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Sonoma to be affixed this 21st day of June 2018.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
We have so much to celebrate. That works too.
I don't know why you Thank you. It was so nice being with you at the Overlook Trail the other day. It was pretty exciting,
It
wasn't
is exciting.
But I
Mhm.
wanted to present this to you, and you're doing such a wonderful job. We're very lucky to have you here in Sonoma.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to say a few words to introduce our parks crew and acknowledge our recreation partners as part of this celebration that it's officially going to be National Park and Recreation Month in Sonoma. Let's celebrate a little bit. Talking about our parks team first. Thank you. Oh. That would help. Okay. So our parks team works every day to make life better for Sonoma's residents and visitors. They maintain 14 parks, including the Plaza and Depot Park, and more than 4 miles of bike paths. And I'm sure you've seen the crew out and about on the plaza, mowing the grass, pruning the roses, cleaning the duck pond, and doing everything they do to make it such a wonderful place and be ready for all the events that happen on the plaza all year round. The parks team is part of Public Works Operations, which is managed by Trent Hudson. So I'll let Trent take it from here as far as talking about the team.
Good evening. She already mentioned all the bike paths we have in the parks, but some years back, the city only had one park, and that was the Plaza Park, and now we have all this extended parks, and we have 3 full-time seasoned parks maintenance guys that take care of that, and also 2 part-time parks maintenance people, and they're all led by Terry Melberg, our parks supervisor. So this time I'd like to call Terry up and let him introduce his crew and say a few words.
I didn't get the memo to wear orange tonight. So I'd like to introduce the crew: Tom Arrington, Stephen Cowan, Chris Muller, and our two part-time guys who aren't present are Nick Moline and Chuck Mutchler. Thank you.
Say thank you so much. I ask you a million questions and you're so nice to me. So I appreciate it.
And of course, as you can imagine, sitting in a meeting is not what this crew does best. This is some pictures of them in action out in the field, and that's what I see them doing every day, smiling generally, and enjoying providing service to the community. So that's our city staff, but we're talking Parks and Recreation, and the city partners with local organizations to provide recreation services for the community here in Sonoma. So we don't have park or city staff that provides recreation to the community. We have partner organizations, and these organizations deliver our core recreation programs on behalf of the city. They enhance the overall health and well-being of Sonoma's citizens, like we heard in the proclamation, and ensure a high quality of life for our residents. So our core recreation partners are shown on this slide. They include the Boys and Girls Club, of course, for youth programming, the Sonoma Community Center that provides cultural and educational opportunities. The Sonoma Ecology Center provides environmental education and fosters relationships between the community and nature. And the Vintage House Sonoma provides senior services. And in addition to the recreational services that the Sonoma Ecology Center provides to the community, they also maintain and operate Sonoma Garden Park, the Montini Preserve, the Nathanson Creek Preserve, and the Friar Creek East Fork Trailway. And Richard Dale, Executive Director of Sonoma Ecology Center, is nice enough to be here to celebrate with us. I don't know if you want to say anything or just be here.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Richard. And then we have some other partners that include the Sebastiani Theater Foundation for renovation and programming of the historic theater that provides the community with cultural arts, theater, and youth programs. Sonoma Valley Field of Dreams operates and maintains some turf areas and play fields. And then Sonoma Splash, as Mr. Brown talked about during public comments, working towards a public swimming pool. And then our celebration wouldn't be complete without acknowledging the Sonoma Overlook Trail Stewards, the group of volunteers that the city relies on to take care of the Sonoma Overlook Trail. Sonoma Ecology Center is also the nonprofit organization that supports the volunteer group. The photo on the slide is from our kickoff event yesterday for this major trail reroute and rehabilitation project. Really appreciate the mayor being there to represent the council at that event, especially with the youth worker team that's there starting to work on the trail this week. So in closing, I want to thank the city council and the city management team, because all this couldn't happen without the work that you all do for the community. And then just would like you to join me in thanking the city's parks team and our recreation partners for making life better for everyone in Sonoma. And we can take some pictures. Yeah. Great. Thank you. No, you just came out for pictures, so you get more pictures now.
I'm not dressed
I'll
for a
take a
picture.
picture.
Okay. You can take a picture.
You blend in really well. Yeah, thanks. I got my phone too, Kathy. Absolutely. All right. That's very unsafe. All right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Money. Oh, that works too, but that doesn't quite look as pretty. All right. Take some more. Keep smiling. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
And thanks.
Next, we have presentation of the 2017 Police Annual Report.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Before I get started, what a great parks crew we have, really. They do such a phenomenal job, and we're so fortunate to have them. And I had the privilege, actually, of sitting down and meeting this group here as well. And boy, what a bunch of bright stars that this city has in the future. So congrats to them, and they're even sticking around. How great is that, right? So this is an annual event for me. So I go through my annual report. On behalf of the members of the Sonoma Police Department, I am happy to present our annual report for 2017. I am very pleased with the hard work, dedication, and the efforts of all the men and women who work for the department. I'd like to start off with our mission statement because it really is our guiding principles, which stays in partnership with our community. We commit to provide professional, firm, fair, and compassionate law enforcement services with both integrity and respect. And I think our actions in this report reflect our continued commitment to those core values. It's an understatement, but 2017, I think, will always forever be defined by the Nuns Fire that ravaged through our beautiful valley in October. The high winds, heavy fuel loads, and low humidity created the perfect conditions for a fast-moving complex of fires, which will later become the most destructive fires in California history. The city of Sonoma opened their EOC the morning of October 9th, and we immediately went to work trying to determine the scope of the fires, particularly in the Sonoma Valley and the city of Sonoma. Within hours, we had requested additional resources and opened 3 shelters for the Sonoma Valley evacuees, which included those who were medically fragile from the Sonoma Developmental Center. For the next 8 days, the city's Emergency Operations Center provided critical leadership to the residents of the city of Sonoma and played a major role in supporting the Sonoma County Emergency Operations Center by providing assistance to the entire valley. When the fires were finally extinguished and over, the city of Sonoma was fortunate to have been spared the destruction seen in many other communities. While we credit the hundreds and thousands of highly competent and dedicated public safety professionals, community members, and leaders, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to Mother Nature, who we believe spared the city we love so much. Despite 3 separate bank robberies within just weeks here in Sonoma, we did experience a decline in our overall crime rate. Our violent crime fell by 28%, and our property crime fell by 12%. It should be noted, however, as we all know, Sonoma is small, and we have a relatively low crime rate. So a couple crimes here and there can have a big swing, but nonetheless, we're happy to report that we had a decline overall. And at the same time, a little bit of a public service announcement, even though we did have a decline in our crime rate, I believe there's still room for improvement. Petty theft continues to be our #1 reported crime, and I believe many of those are just simply crimes of opportunity. So I beg our community to please take the time to lock your doors and windows and safeguard your property. It'll go a long way to keeping things safe for us all. And I think the crime rates reflect what we know, that Sonoma is a great place to live, work, and raise a family. And we see it every day. And I think just recently we were voted one of the top travel places in the world. So that goes without saying. Our clearance rates, which are those that are cleared by arrests or other extenuating circumstances, continue to outpace the state of California's clearance rate. 84% of our violent crimes have been cleared and 41% of our property crimes, which I think reflects a diligent follow-through, robust investigations, and a steadfast involvement by our community. The little-known secret in law enforcement is that crimes get solved because community members act as our eyes and ears and come forward and report crime. So that's a good indication that we have a strong relationship with our community. In 2017, the total number of people arrested declined, but we did see an increase in the number of youth that we referred to our diversion program. The Sonoma Valley Youth and Family Services Program has undergone numerous changes in the last year, and the outcomes have been very, very positive. It's good to report we see a continued decrease in the number of arrests for drunk driving. While the exact cause is yet to be determined, we confidently feel that we think the proliferation of Uber and Lyft has had a big impact on people staying off the roadways, especially in the downtown area. I also credit our continued efforts to provide free responsible beverage service training to our local ABC or alcohol serving establishments. And I also thank those establishments for taking the time and energy to send their staff to those trainings so that they can all be more educated about what to look for. As in other years, the statewide traffic reporting, accident reporting system is a little behind schedule in reporting it, but our internal data shows that we're continuing to see a decrease in the number of traffic accidents, which hopefully suggests that we have a robust traffic safety program, but yet it continues to be not only a high priority for our community, it is for us as well. Our response times to priority 1 calls, those are the most serious, increased from the previous year. I think on Monday I talked a little bit about that as well. For those who want to know, our response times are calculated by the time the dispatcher picks the phone up and by the time an officer arrives on scene. So it's kind of the whole totality of when the call comes through, because that's really a reflective of how long someone has to wait. As I mentioned in the budget workshop, that it has increased, and I think some of it has to do with traffic congestion, particularly around the plaza area, since we're up here on the First Street West. So I do hope that the installation, if it is approved, installation of an automatic gate over on First Street East may have an impact of improving our response times even better, especially to the east side of the Sonoma. The police department provides animal care and control services for the city, which includes things like animal licensing, permit review, enforcement of city, county, and state laws related to animals, care and impounding of animals as well. Community service officers primarily fill this role for us, but when they're absent, then the deputies do so. In 2017, we saw a slight decrease in the number of animal-related calls, a slight increase, excuse me, but a decrease in the number of animals that were brought into our shelter. If a dog comes into our shelter, it's usually returned to his rightful owner in less than 2 days, which shows that we have responsible dog owners here in the city, and also kind of underscores the importance of getting your dog licensed so that we can quickly reunify them with their rightful owner. As a matter of fact, last year we processed 1,575 dog licenses, which is the most we've ever done, and it seems to be a steady increase in compliance, which is great for us. There were 7 dog bites that we investigated, and we issued 5 citations for license violations. In 2017, we issued about 2,400 parking citations, primarily in and around the plaza. About half of those were all for timed violations. Parking enforcement, of course, is a big deal for us and a big deal for the community, and so we're going to continue to make that a priority as best we can. Our K-9 team had 33 patrol-related deployments, which resulted in 10 suspect surrenders. I can't tell you how important that is for us, because without the K-9, there's a chance that some of those 10 or all those 10 could have resulted in some type of a use of force between the arresting officer and the suspect. So having the K-9 team and just the mere fact that people surrender to the presence of a dog goes a long way in making everybody safer. The K-9 team also had 10 narcotic-related deployments, one of which resulted in discovery of a large quantity of methamphetamine and 8 illegally possessed firearms and 3 arrests. They completed over 200 hours of training and made numerous appearances at events. Deputy Eric Smith, our school resource officer, he completed his 2nd year. He is a highly experienced and competent and relates well with both students, faculty, and parents. This last year, he became certified to teach or facilitate the Parent Project, which is a 10-week course designed for parents for difficult and out-of-control adolescents. The program is offered in partnership with the Sonoma Valley Youth and Family Service Program. It seems to have quite a strong following. We continue to have an amazing cadre of volunteers, whether it's the older volunteers in policing or our younger explorers. They do a variety of tasks for us, help us in the community. They're really a force multiplier. Last year, they gave well over 2,000 hours to this community and to us in a variety of different things. I'm also proud to report that our own Sonoma VIP, Jim Karabochis, which most of you know, if you go to Peach, you'll know him for sure. He was selected as Volunteer of the Year for the Sheriff's Office and was recognized by the Board of Supervisors for his efforts and the stuff that he's done here in the city of Sonoma. And lastly, one of our primary goals is to build public trust and confidence, and we do that through public outreach and a strong tradition of community involvement. Unfortunately, we are not very good at necessarily advertising that or talking about it. We're just going to be kind of quietly competent people. But I thought I would take a few minutes to highlight some of the things we have done in the community so you're aware. First and foremost, as your chief, I sit on at least 2 local nonprofit boards and the committees of several other of them. I mentor 6 young men through the Sonoma Valley Mentoring Alliance. I, as well as other members of our staff, have had speaking engagements at every service club, I think, in Sonoma, if not once or twice during the year. Things like Rotary, Kiwanis, Serves, the Salon, Newcomers Club, to name a few. 3 of our deputies participate in the Schools of Hope reading program, where they spend 1 hour each week reading to kids in the elementary school system. The SRO and the K-9 officer also mentor several students each year for their senior project. The SRO facilitates, as I mentioned earlier, the parent project class. The K-9 officer also makes numerous appearances at community events and school function, where he shows off our most popular crime-fighting deputy, Dickie. And we're invited the community to have coffee with us through numerous Coffee with a Cop programs, usually about once a quarter, although we didn't do it during the fires, of course. Last year, with the Deputy Sheriff's Association, we handed out turkeys and hams at Thanksgiving and Christmas to those people in our community that are most needy. We also handed out over 100 toys and bicycles to kids that are participating in the Mentoring Alliance program. And these are just a few things that we do. You'll also see us at the farmers market and baseball games and other special events held throughout the year. So in closing, and in reality it is in closing, because this is my last time I'll probably be presenting to the council, I do want to thank the council for their support and leadership, particularly during the fires, and to publicly acknowledge the great work done by our city staff. They truly are a group of dedicated professionals and have been a pleasure to work with. And I look forward to a successful 2018. This concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had any.
I have a very serious question.
Okay.
1, how is Dickie doing? And 2, how long do dogs usually stay working? And how long could we expect to have them working for us?
Great question. So there is, it varies depending upon a variety of factors. Typically, canines can work as long as 6 to 8 years. So we're getting close on Dickie. Sometimes they can be extended, sometimes they go sooner depending upon medical issues, particularly hip dysplasia. Dickie looks to be strong. His bark is loud. I think Councilmember Cook could probably attest to that every morning when he wakes up by Dickie. So he's looking good. We have a program in place that we have beginning to kind of try to pre-fund the purchase of a new dog. So assuming the council would like to continue that program, which I certainly encourage you to do so.
On public outreach. You know, I think I had the wrong picture, so I apologize. I also wanted to say Jim Karabochos, is that how you say?
Karabochos.
Well, he's the only guy I know that calls me kid. So I really appreciate him being on with the Sheriff's Department. Makes me feel good. And the other thing, your school resource officer Eric Smith is amazing.
Thank you.
You know, he's been working with us, obviously, with the group risk with respect to drugs and alcohol that affect kids here in Sonoma and the Valley. He's just wonderful. He's on call. He'll give us information when we have questions. He's always available to us, and I would imagine he's just as wonderful with the kids at the high school as well.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. So thank you for this
Thank you.
the report. I don't know if you have any other questions or comments. Thank you.
I guess
thank you.
just all of us, if this is your last report, just, you know, thank you so much. And it's sort of impossible to imagine who might fill your shoes, but we're so glad that we have you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Madam Mayor, we'll be moving into the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, the council may decide to change the order of the agenda.
What is the pleasure of the city council? This is fine? All right, so we'll go to 5.1, I think, public comment. So at this point, I'd like to go to public comment. 5.1? No.
On the consent calendar?
On the
5.1,
calendar.
5.2.
Does anyone have any changes they'd like to see for this, for the agenda? No comments? I'll close the public comment. So what's the pleasure of the,
I have a question about 5.4, so I guess I want to pull that.
okay, so you want that pulled? Okay, do we have anyone for the other 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3? Approval? Yeah, the motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Henley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Mayor Agramonte?
Aye,
Thank
and
you.
I'd like the city manager to address the question for,
Yeah, and just, I think there was a request to have Greg Larson, who's been kind of the facilitator. He is here also, so depending on the nature of the question of Vice Mayor Harrington, he is also here to answer any questions.
Is the only question I have is, in the budget we considered on Monday, are any additional funds that are needed to fulfill item 5.4 already included, or does that need to be changed?
They are not already included, so that would need to be an adjustment.
Okay, and when will we get that adjustment?
Well, we can add that to the budget resolution that you would be approving on Monday. So they're not included currently, and what we would do if council makes the approval today, then we would just add that action, and we would adjust the final budget and include those items.
so are you ready?
And then will the additional funds come out of the reserves, or?
Yes, it would just basically become, if you remember, this would be operating costs. So there was, I don't know the exact, I want to say about $160,000 net between our operating revenues and our operating expenses. So, and the primary increases are the same compensation that the council has provided to other employees, and then a small deferred contribution. So those items would just come out of that capacity, I guess would be the right word.
So what's the pleasure? Make a motion?
Move to approve item 5.4.
I'll second that.
All right, roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Henley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
So we are moving on to 6.1.
Correct. I'm sorry.
Discussion, consideration, and possible action to introduce and conduct first reading of an ordinance amending the municipal code to enhance the city's administrative penalty, administrative citation, and administrative notice and order proceedings.
This is city manager.
All right, Mayor Agramonte and Council. So if you recall back middle of May, we had a brief conversation in front of the council to talk about our administrative citation program. Basically, we have a active code enforcement program, and we can deal with kind of more permanent or structural issues, but we don't have the right tools to deal with those temporary issues of someone violating our codes that we're catching someone at a point in time. So council agreed to ask us to update our ordinances. That is what is in front of you tonight. So with me is our Assistant City Attorney, John Abachi, who's drafted all the language, and Bob Smith, who is both our City Prosecutor and our Code Enforcement Manager. So they will kind of provide the update for you. If you recall, council, we did have a conversation about fines and what levels and how much, whether, for example, someone smoking in the plaza, you might be able to do up to, I want to say $100 per the first infraction, but maybe you want to do something lower. We are not bringing you the fine recommendations tonight. What we're bringing you is the ordinance to make all the kind of the policy changes and the regulation changes. When we come back with a second reading, which we would plan to do at the July 23rd meeting, then we will bring you back some recommendations on the fines. But we haven't had a chance to talk those through yet, and we want to reflect on them before we bring them to you. So since nothing would go into effect until after the ordinance is approved, we've got time to kind of make sure that we hit that sweet spot, to hit the, I think what we heard is some of the policy interests that you all had. So with that, I'll turn to Mr. Bocci to give an overview about kind of how the ordinances are constructed, and happy to answer any questions of the council after that.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, staff's recommendation tonight is to introduce the ordinance which would amend chapters 1.12 and 1.30 and add chapter 1.28 to the municipal code to enhance the city's administrative code enforcement proceedings. There would be one small change that we are requesting at the dais. Each council member has a copy of a revised showing the red line change that we would like to make to the ordinance that is in the packet. That is on page 62. So that handout would merely substitute for page 62 in the packet. And so we would ask that with the motion, if the council so chooses, to introduce the ordinance, that be included in the motion.
Just one point of clarification though, John, the part that is in the red is the change. Okay, the rest of it was already within the ordinance, it's just striking, is that correct, John?
That's correct. This is an ordinance that takes the old language and the new language and melds it, so you can see there is underlining to show additions and strikeout to show changes. The only modification tonight to the ordinance, which is in your packet, is shown in red, and it is the red line deletion of the beginning of section C. That those 6 words are the change that we're going to be requesting. As an overview, the city currently performs administrative enforcement of violations of the municipal code through administrative fine proceedings in chapter 1.30. This ordinance would modify that procedure and also add a new procedure for violations of a more temporary or transitory nature, and provide corrective remedies as well for violations. Under the proposed ordinance, any violation of the municipal code can be enforced through the following methods. Number 1, by a fine, either through an administrative citation for temporary and transitory violations, or through an administrative notice and order for continuing or property-related violations. The second method by which any violation could be enforced is through corrective action. The administrative notice and order process can result in a nuisance determination being made and an order to correct the nuisance within a certain period of time. And if it is not corrected by the owner of the property, then a direction to the city to take action to abate the nuisance at the owner's expense through an assessment or a lien. And then the final method to enforce violations of municipal code would be criminal action, either an infraction or a misdemeanor, which could result in fine or jail time ordered by the court. As a short summary of the process, which we did lay out as the city manager stated earlier during the workshop, an administrative citation is a citation issued with the fine stated on the citation. There would only be a hearing if it is requested. If a hearing is requested, the fine would have to be deposited. Payment is to be made within 15 days of the citation being issued. A hearing is scheduled within 15 to 60 days of the citation being issued. The only penalty for an administrative citation is a fine. There is no other penalty to be assessed. And again, this is for temporary violations, like, for instance, leaf blowing or smoking within the public park. The second process in the proposed ordinance is an administrative notice and order. If the violation is a building, zoning, or similar violation that does not present immediate danger, then the owner is given a period of 10 to 90 days to correct, as may be reasonable under the circumstances. If the violation is not corrected, there is a hearing. The hearing date is set at the time that the administrative notice and order is issued. There will be a hearing in each case, unless it is resolved in advance. The hearing officer determines whether a violation has been committed, whether the violation constitutes a public nuisance, If it does, in order to correct or abate the nuisance by a certain date, and if it is not corrected or abated, then a direction to the city to take those steps necessary to correct the violation. Challenges may be made either to an administrative citation or administrative notice in order to the Superior Court. All other changes in the proposed ordinance are merely to make the language consistent throughout the code. There are other references to certain sections in Chapter 1.30 that have been eliminated or moved. So those references are for consistency. We also wanted, of course, the ordinance to be internally consistent between the two procedures. As I said, we did include a lot of the existing language for the system and the processes that the city prosecutor undertakes for the administrative, what will be now called administrative notice and order proceedings. So we wanted to make everything consistent, and we also made some changes to update and make consistent with state law. The one small change that I was describing before is merely to remove prior to issuing an administrative citation from page 62 in your packet. Bob Smith, the city prosecutor, is also here to answer any questions of the council. That completes my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Do we have any questions?
Who's the hearing officer for the fines?
We have a list of 3 ALJs that we rotate through. It'd be the same hearing officer that we would use. Routinely, we have a hearing about once every 2 months. So the admin citations would just be added to that calendar probably.
Where's that held?
Right here in this chamber.
It's like the old courthouse, right?
Yeah, it's like the old court days, except
Probably
we don't have a
get really
bailiff or a judge. But other than
Anyone
that.
else? Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, just a clarification. So this is the ordinance that's establishing that you can do this and putting some parameters around it, but we're gonna have like a schedule of the fees. And I imagine that, is that something that's always gonna be council approved, or is it gonna be something that can be internally updated, or if the council has a problem with it, then we can bring it forward and change it?
Yeah, part of what we wanted to do was to have the fees set by resolution, not with the ordinance, so that they aren't, kind of frozen and more cumbersome to change. So just, I guess my vision is, every year when we look at the rest of our fee schedule and we update them, it would be a point that we could also put these types of fines, even that, or look at it every few years. We haven't quite figured that out, but it is what we'll bring back as a resolution to you in July, and you'll be approving that. So from time to time, I think especially initially, we can try this and we can see, and then we can get some feedback and see if you want to adjust upper or lower based on kind of how this program rolls out.
And then I think we talked about it a little bit. Are we going to have any form of instant pay for people?
I'm not sure we've
create
gotten
that option?
Yeah, I don't know if we've gotten that. I don't think we're there yet with our technology, so we've not followed up on that yet.
Okay, thank you.
So it could just, be nice to have an app, huh?
We should just have Apple Pay. I don't even know how it works.
I know. Does it take a password? That's all
The
I
kids
wanna
do it.
know.
Bob. Rachel Ballo, 822 2nd Street West. And I'm standing before you, and I'm presuming that you have been briefed the end of last year on the lawsuit that I raised in Santa Rosa against the city of Sonoma involving these very ordinances that you're dealing with. And I'm here to suggest some, I'm very familiar with these ordinances, so I have fine-tooth combed them. First of all, I would like to applaud the additions and the corrections to the ordinances. As Mr. Smith can attest to, they were widely subject to the litigation in front of the appellate court, and a lot of what you have in front of you now clarifies where we are and where the city should be. Because what is perhaps not mentioned and need not be mentioned in the paperwork in front of you is that the Sonoma Municipal Code, with its infraction and fine levels, was in contradiction to the California Government Code. And you will see that there's a significant reduction in the fine levels from $250 to $100 as a max for first violation, from $500 to $200 for the second violation. So unfortunately, the city has been operating under a municipal code that was inconsistent and contrary to state law. That was part of our litigation. We did not need to go there because, as you are probably aware, after a day-and-a-half trial, well fought on both sides, I trust, I was afforded all the relief by the court, including costs, which the city has paid. But I want to go to some of the particular sections because, as I said, I have lived and breathed the language. In the amended Exhibit A, which is the infraction language, I understand that the that the thrust would be to put an infraction for a code violation in the same paragraph and scheme as a leaf blower violation or smoking violation. But I think that some of the language needs to be better clarified so that if you're talking about an administrative fine, it is so stated. When you mix the word prosecution with the term criminal in the same paragraph, it is cause for great confusion, as Mr. Smith at trial.
I will have to stop you. It's a 3-minute comment period. So I'm sorry, perhaps you can at another date sit with Mr. Smith, but you're over time right now.
That's fine.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from? Seeing none, I'll be closing the public session. So we're getting back to the issue here. What is the pleasure of the council that we're moving forward on a first reading?
Make a motion to, do we need a motion to approve it, or we're just having it read? Oh, okay. I'll make a motion to introduce an ordinance amending the municipal code to enhance the city's administrative penalty, administrative citation, and administrative notice and order proceedings.
With the change.
As amended, yeah.
I'll second that.
May I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hunley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
The motion carries 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And if you're ready, Madam Mayor, we're moving into our regular calendar, 7.1. This is a joint city council and successor agency item. Discussion, consideration, and direction on approval of a city resolution authorizing housing bond proceeds for the Altamira Apartments project located at 20269 Broadway Avenue. Approval of a funding agreement between the City of Sonoma and the Sonoma County Community Development Commission for transfer of the determined funds. Ratification of a housing bonds expenditure agreement as the city and successor agency. Authorization for the city manager to draft and execute a commitment letter for tax application purposes, and direction on the amount of funding to be determined by City Council between $1,400,000 and $1,450,000 plus interest accrued.
Thank you.
Well, just one second.
And I'm turning this over to our city manager.
Yes, I apologize. Good evening again. I am getting Bill Erkey, who's our redevelopment counsel, who's located out of the area, on conference call, just in case there's any need for his advice, et cetera, since he drafted the document. So, Mr. Erkey, are you with us?
I'm here.
Okay. Okay. So with that, let me provide an overview to the council. As council's well aware, in March of 2011, we sold bonds for $15.75 million. These were redevelopment bonds, and part of the effort of the city to try to ensure funding for some projects that were kind of mid-process with the governor's threat to dissolve redevelopment. Part of that, based on state law, is that there was 20% of those funds that were set aside for low and moderate income housing projects, which within the bond issuance was $1.45 million. So those bonds have been sitting since 2011 as we went through the redevelopment process to get clarity and the ability to use the funds. In February of 2017 of this year, we brought forward an agreement that to the Oversight Board, and it was approved by the State Department of Finance. And this was a bond expenditure agreement to provide clarity that these bonds were able to be provided and used. And so the agreement basically takes the bonds from kind of the Bank of New York, where they currently sit as our trustee holding. They would come to the city, and this bond expenditure agreement now gives the authority for the city to take those funds and then use them for the construction of affordable housing in our community. As council's aware, the Altamira project, affordable housing project, was recently approved, and it's been, as my understanding, the intention of the community to use these funds for that project. And so the other piece of the history here is with the redevelopment dissolution, the city had a choice whether they wanted to be the housing successor agency or not. And a number of agencies chose not to. Our community chose not to, and so all of our housing assets were transferred to the county's Community Development Commission, and they basically sit as the housing successor agency, and they manage the affordable housing assets from that process. So what is in front of you today is basically a variety of actions, and there's some policy questions for you to think about that will now enable us to take and transfer this funding from our reserves into the project to be used for the construction of the Altamira Affordable Housing Project. So a few things though on this, and I think Adam Cooperman is here from SAHA if council has questions. So currently the original request that came from SAHA was for $1.4 million. If you remember, again, we have $1.45, and the bond funding has to be used for capital projects, construction projects, and it has to be used within kind of a certain amount of time. And we're already at 2017, and the bonds were issued in 2011. The other piece that the other action council has already done, and this was I'm not sure exactly, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there was a $100,000 pre-construction loan that was approved by the city council, and I think that was considered kind of part of the overall package. So you had $100,000 you were investing in a loan, and then you had $1.4 million that was going to come out of the bond proceeds. In looking at that construction loan, there's not a term in that loan agreement. And I think that is one piece that we may want to clean up within this process here and put a term on. So as the staff report articulates, I believe the council has a choice. You can decide and you can provide just $1.4 million to the county, who would then invest it in the SAHA project here in our community. Or you could do the entire 1.45 plus there's about $30,000 in interest that's been accrued. So all of that funding could be given and provided through this process and go to the Altamira, to SAHA for the Altamira project. If the council provided the full 1.48 amount, then I would, the conversations I've had with SAHA is we would restructure and put some clarification in that construction loan where they would pay us back within 5 years of kind of when they got the initial funding and or when they get their construction loan. So I think there's an ability for us, if we give the full amount, to get paid sooner, our $100,000, and that $100,000 came from general fund reserves. So because we don't have another affordable housing project ready to go construction and kind of on the horizon, and also the SAHA project and the Altamira project took longer because there was a lot of community involvement and vetting and review, which then means the project has gotten more expensive over time, and that's okay. It's the way the process works. But my recommendation to the council is that we give the entire 1.48 to this project, and that we would add a little language within the resolution. And as we talk through, we can give you some of that would also let us clarify that the construction loan, that we would be paid back, frankly, sooner than what is not articulated clearly enough in the loan agreement that was done a couple of years ago. So again, Mr. Erke's on the phone and can speak to any of the specifics in terms of some of the agreements. There are 4 actions that we're asking council to take. One is approving a resolution that basically authorizes the proceeds of the funding, and we've left the agreement is written broadly, so wherever you land, 1.4, 1.45 plus interest, so you've got flexibility. There would also be a funding agreement between the city and the county community development agency. We also, the housing bonds agreement, this expenditure agreement that lets us now take the money from the bonds and gives the city the authority to make these actions. It was approved by the oversight board, but we had to do it twice, getting through Department of Finance, and it didn't come back to the city council. So we're asking you to ratify that. It's not necessarily legally necessary, but it's just good protocol for that to occur. And then part of what Mr. Cooperman can speak to this, the other item is authorizing me to draft a commitment letter so that letter can go with Saha's application through the state process to try to get tax increment financing so they can move forward with the construction of the project that the council has approved. So I think if council would like to hear from Mr. Cooperman, you can do that at this time as well, and happy to answer any questions. And again, Mr. Erke's on the phone if there's any legal issues at all.
Questions?
This is my first time through this process. How do we know that the county will definitely apply our funds to our projects?
So I believe part of what we've done in this is there are a variety of agreements where we've written that this funding comes back to this project. Bill, do you want to speak to that at all?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the entire question.
Okay. So the question from Vice Mayor Harrington was, how do we confirm that the actual funding that we would transfer to the county would then be used for this project? And I believe the language specifies that the money comes back.
Yes, the language specifies that the county would be responsible for ensuring that the bond proceeds, once transferred, are used for the project identified. And if the county does not satisfy the requirements in the contract, then the bond proceeds would have to be returned so that we basically keep track of them.
Okay, sounds good.
So I see the bond spending plan. I don't actually, is it a separate document? I see it references that we can change it. We just have to stay compliant with the bond documents, but I also don't see that information. Am I missing it?
In terms of the bond documents themselves?
Mm-hmm.
So the bond documents, the language was, we didn't put the full bond documents because they're quite long, but they are within the agreement. I believe within one of the agreements we put the language in, and it was quite broad within. It basically just says that it can be used for low-income housing, and it did not. So there was a lot of flexibility. And again, I'll let Mr. Erke speak to that as well.
That's correct. The bond closing documents are voluminous, so they're not attached here. But in general, the bonds like that, as was typical with redevelopment agency bonds that were using housing or that wanted to be used for housing purposes, basically had the ability to use those proceeds so long as it was consistent with the community redevelopment law and the furtherance of affordable housing. So that's basically what the bond document requirements are. And anytime there is a specific project that would be consistent with what the use of the proceeds would be, then you're fine under the bond documents.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions? I have a question. So there's option 1 and option 2, and I think you just popped out in the application. Is option 2 was 1.48
about 1.48. Yeah, it's about 30,000, I believe, is what interest. This was as of a couple months ago, so I haven't checked.
So
but
I'm
it's
sorry, I
about
have to
that.
repeat because I didn't have my microphone. Option 2, as I said, it just popped, I just read the word interest. When it reads here, provide 1.45 million plus interest, which brings us up to the 1.
Yeah, it's about 1.48.
All right, thank you.
It's in that, and
That
we
was
wanted
just
to keep it general based on by the time we execute whatever the interest is at that point.
And so so what is the deadline for spending the money? It says 5 years. Is that from today or is that from some past date?
I'll let the attorney speak to this too, but we are okay. So, Ms. Durkee, the question was.
No, I'm not talking about right now. I'm
sorry.
saying like specifically, when is the deadline to spend the money?
Okay, so in terms of the bond deadline or in terms of a deadline we're giving the county?
The bond deadline.
Okay, so, Mr. Durkee, did you hear that question?
I did. The bond deadline, it's basically, there are ways of, the short answer is the IRS generally has guidelines where anywhere between 5 to 7 years, proceeds need to be used for what are defined as, quote, eligible expenses. Of course, with the bond proceeds for housing, turning it over and having it available for even in design phase for a project like this satisfies that. If it comes to a point where there is no project available, and that's not where we are now, but if it ever comes to a point, what bond documents do allow you to do is actually invest them in, for instance, if they're tax-exempt bonds, in other tax-exempt investments and just have them used that way until such time as the project comes along. But to answer your question, it's generally between 5 and 7 years, and what happens is the IRS usually doesn't get concerned until even after that, and then you might get a letter asking about what's happening with those proceeds.
And I think Councilmember Hundley has another question.
One more question. So, could the extra $500,000 and change be put into some sort of tax-exempt housing trust fund?
Is that for me?
Yes, so it's not 500,000, it's probably about 80,000.
4.5. No, I'm not talking.
sorry.
I'm not talking about the interest.
Okay.
Because no, you said option 1 on here is 4 million.
4 million.
Option 2 is 4.5. So I'm talking about 0.5, which would be $500,000.
It's $1,450,000, $50,000, and the interest is $30,000. What you're saying is that it would be basically 1,450,000 is $50,000. And then the interest is $30,000.
Okay, I'm not talking about the interest. All right, I will find it. I thought we were talking about 4 and 4.5.
No, I'm sorry, it's 1.4 and 1.45.
1.4.
Correct, so the
1.5.
real,
So it
the
is
real
just a little
difference, the
bit.
net we're talking about is an $80,000.
Okay.
So
All
it's a
right.
fairly
That
modest
clarifies
amount of money in terms of an ability to do a bigger project.
Yes.
But
Changes everything.
your other question, did you have a follow-up though on that?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
What was the when the project was first discussed, was there ever discussion at the city council about the amount of money that Saha wanted us to contribute? Is this the first time any amount of the city being asked to contribute has been discussed?
I'm
Do you
looking at
know?
I'm looking at Mr. Goodison here too, because being new on the block, and maybe we can ask Mr. Cooperman to speak to that. So what I've heard historically is that this was funding that has been seen and visualized for quite some time to be for that project. Now, so I don't know exact timing of any other, when it was back in front of you.
I just recalled that I had heard $1 million, so I just wanted to know from those that were there, is this the same amount that was originally contemplated?
So my understanding has been that when that bond was developed, that this funding was intended for the development of the Broadway site. But at that point, Saha had not been selected. This was several years earlier. And then when we went through the kind of wrenching and lengthy changes associated with the termination of redevelopment, all of that was put on hold. But my understanding is that that bond funding was intended for this site, but at that time, the project had not even been conceived of.
So the express purpose of this bond was to complete this housing project on Broadway.
That's my understanding of the intent.
So at this point, I'd like to know, is it okay for me to call Mr. Cooperman up so he can enlighten us? Thank you. Mr. Cooperman?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Give you just a real quick update on the project since we stood before you a couple of months ago. We have gotten full approval from the Design and Historical Preservation Committee. And I think that, ultimately the lengthy community process that we went through helped evolve the project into something that I believe is very beautiful and is going to be a long-time asset for the community. We are preparing a tax credit application in the competitive 9% tax credit category that is due July 2nd. This is a very competitive process, and applications are scored across developments throughout the entire state of California with a limited amount of funding to be awarded. We are in a optimistic looking position, and the way in which application becomes more competitive than the next is based on the layered funding that has been committed to that project. So, we have received funding from the city in the form of the pre-development loan at this point. The county has committed funds from their county fund for housing asset pool, and the project has also been awarded a small amount of federal home dollars. The tax credit portion then makes up the remainder of the significant chunk of financing to help develop the project. We have picked up a lot of momentum since we've last seen you, and we're excited to be submitting this application with our fingers crossed, and the city commitment would be very, very helpful in receiving a potential award. If an award is received, there is a very good likelihood that the project could break ground this year, before the end of this calendar year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Cooperman?
What's the total estimated cost of construction?
We're looking at a roughly $24 million project.
No one else? Thank you, Mr. Cooperman.
Thank you.
And at this time, I'd like to open this up for public comment. Seeing no one rise and approach the podium, I will close the public comment. So it looks as if we have 3 tasks, and Mr. Adachi or the city manager could walk us through those. And do we have to open as a successor agency, or we're already opened?
It was noticed as a joint meeting and a joint item, so you can act.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, so there are 4 actions that are in front of you to take, and listed under the recommended council action. So the first would be approving the resolution, and whoever's going to make it, I think the other piece is wanting some clarity about the level. So if it's the entire amount, the 1.45 plus interest, it's part of the initial motion. That would be part of approving the resolution, and then we would basically move forward with that action. So if you approve the resolution, but we want you to set the amount by direction. In terms of that resolution, and may I ask Mr. Abachi for some assistance here. He and I were talking, I've worked with this with Mr. Urke. If you look on the resolution, which the first resolution, and the very end, section 3, this is on page 75 of the packet. It says that basically you're authorizing the transfer and use of the housing bond proceeds. And section 3 says the city manager has the authority to take any all actions necessary to properly implement that authorization and for the transfer, including and not limited to, and there's some things that are articulated. If council is interested in part of this to also clarify the terms of the construction loan, We could amend section 3 to create a little language that the construction loan, and you could direct me to put some, to clarify the terms of that construction loan, that it's to be paid back within 5 years of the, kind of the last funding received and/or when SAHA receives their funding, which would allow us to get the $100,000 that we provided for the construction loan sooner. Again, because currently the agreement does not have a due date and term. So I would recommend, if you're interested in doing that, we could create some language and add that to the resolution.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Kathy, can I, so with that 100,000 repayment, is there a way to designate that towards our, towards housing fund and keep that 100,000 fund?
You could use that for seed, you could definitely do that when that comes back in. You could designate that funding comes back and goes into a future housing trust fund.
Great, thank you.
Can we require them to repay $80,000 of it if we approve $1,480,000? Upon receipt of this funds, can we require them to repay $80,000?
And sorry, run the numbers by me again, sorry.
So if we give, there's the base 1.4.
Correct.
But there's the additional 50 plus the 30 of interest, whatever
Mhm.
change. Can we require that they repay us $80,000 back to our general fund at the time they receive this loan? That might be a question for Mr. Abachi.
Yeah, let me ask Mr. Erkey. What we had communicated was that, and a conversation with Saha was looking at some of that construction loan. If they got payment, that the 100,000 would come back. So Mr. Erkey, anything else to say there?
Now, I'm saying, instead of waiting for the construction loan, if we approve the larger amount, can we require that they refund us $80,000 at that time? That they receive these funds?
So pay 80,000 of the loan, just right away?
Sooner.
And there's 1.4
Or new loan.
and there's $1 million.
Yeah.
I'm saying of the $80,000, which we would like to get back so we can use it for other housing things, can they repay us that since it's over the initial 1.4? Could they repay us $80,000 of the $100,000 we loaned them immediately upon receiving these funds?
So I think that was partly a question for Mr. Erkey, but I think it's also a question for Saha to see how that affects their cash flow piece.
Well, I guess it wouldn't presumptively, because we have the option of giving them 1.4 or 1.48. And so, since it's discretionary to give it to them or not, why could we not receive back $80,000 of our $100,000 loan? That's a question.
Yeah. Mr. Erkey, do you have any comment to that?
Was the question on if we get money back from the loan, the 100,000?
The question was if we give 1.4, but then we're giving an additional 80,000.
We give 1.48.
Correct. We give 1.48, and then at the time we give the 1.48, could we have the 80,000 come back right away?
Could we require it?
Require it, that the funding come back right away, and therefore we can use, basically it's an early payment on the construction loan, and then that money would be available to other things. It could be drafted that way. I think the question is it something that Saha can do within their cash flow and their process?
I think
I think that's correct, Kathy, on how to respond to it. I suppose it could be, it could be structured in that way, but I think ultimately it's kind of a business decision.
But in terms of using redevelopment funds for other purposes other than this specific affordable housing project, is it okay for those purposes?
So Vice Mayor Harrington's question is, if the money comes, if they're paying us back, is it okay that those funds they're going to come back and they're going to pay for the pre-construction loan, and is it okay for the redevelopment funds to be used for that purpose? If part of the bonds are going to be coming back and going to be paying for pre-construction loans, that's all part of the pre-work, and that is an appropriate use of redevelopment funds.
That is an appropriate use of the funds, yes.
So legally, there's not an issue. I think it's a kind of a business cash flow question for Saha. In terms of a legal constraint, I don't think there is anything.
That's correct. Pre-construction and design is all that is in furtherance of affordable housing is always an eligible use for those funds.
Okay. So if council is interested in exploring that, I would say we would need to ask Mr. Cooperman to speak to that.
I was just going to ask you that. Mr. Cooperman, could you address the council?
So typically, at the time that all financing is committed, is the time that the money goes into escrow and then goes to the limited partnership that's formed. So, in the very same moment that $1.48 million would be committed to the project, the $100,000 would be repaid. So it would happen simultaneously on whatever that closing date is.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion, and this is on, as we move forward
I'll
to
do the resolution.
resolution.
Item number 1. I would like to make a motion to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma authorizing the transfer and use of former Community Development Agency housing bond proceeds in an amount of at least $1.4 million, but not to exceed $1.45 plus interest accrued on the bond proceeds for the Altamira Family Apartments project. And can you remind me again of the amendment that you've suggested?
Yeah, so I think this would be, the amendment that I would ask is in section 3, and this council's gonna need to give us policy direction on this, that we would be clarifying the terms of the construction loan, and that the construction loan would be coming due at the time that the project is funded.
Well, I think, because it sounds like it is gonna happen, but if we just say clarify terms of the construction loan, that might
I
cover
think we can say
conversation.
clarify terms of the construction loan.
And repayment.
Yes.
I'll second that.
All right, before you also, I think it would be helpful before you pass this resolution to also give us kind of just direction clarification. Are you speaking to, is it a full 1.45 with interest?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm hearing that is, so you're asking to pass the resolution, we'll make the amendment to clarify the construction terms, and it is for the full 1.45 plus interest.
And
Correct.
And do we need to add in that the 100,000 when it's repaid goes into a housing fund? Is that part of this?
You can make
section?
that, you can make that point, you can make that
Would
point
you
as
accept
well.
that?
I would like to make that amendment to my motion.
And second again.
That doesn't have to be agendized. Brown Act, we can make designations of funds into specific funds without agendizing, it's fine.
There's was some discussion before the meeting between Mr. Erke and myself regarding that, and the agenda description is sufficiently broad to give the city manager broad authority to implement the council's funding agreement.
Talking about
If it's about repayment of the loan, then I think where the money goes when it gets repaid is a part of dealing with the details of the loan repayment, which I think would be included in this agenda.
So it's really, I mean, if legal seems, Mr. Erke, if you want to speak to this too, but legal seems to be comfortable because it is part of the financing package overall that we're talking about, the construction loan. So the repayment, clarifying the terms and the repayment of the construction loan. If council wants to bring it back, I mean, you're going to have a council subcommittee, you're going to be talking about this, it could come separately.
I don't have a problem with it, it just seems like if we're designating funds to go into a specific purpose, it's my understanding that that's something that would have to have been agendized, but if it doesn't, if that's what our council thinks, that's fine. It's a good idea.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that we don't necessarily have to do this. You're suggesting that, and that because we're going to be hearing the budget soon, and maybe we can say, okay, then there was that.
Not, if it's fine to make a motion, somebody can make the motion.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so, may I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hundley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you, the motion
So
carries
now on
4-0.
to- Thank you so much. So now on to the next phase of this, which is is, let's see, it was the option, number 2, jointly as the council successor agency ratify the housing bonds.
Actually, there's one before that, and Mayor Agramonte, this is approving the funding agreement.
Oh, all right, sorry. As
it's
the
okay.
council takes action on the resolution and funding agreement.
So this would authorize the city manager or designate to finalize the terms and conditions, and this is a funding agreement between the city and the Sonoma County Community Development Commission. And on behalf of the city, and assuming there's a little bit of wiggle room because there's some conversations that if there's anything minor, kind of legalese pieces that their attorneys want to tweak, we don't necessarily have to bring it back. But if the primary kind of terms and conditions, that's why there is that information, assuming it doesn't deviate substantially based on your policy direction. So that is the next item we would like to have council take action on.
Would anybody like to address that?
I would like to make a motion to approve the funding agreement in the form attached to the packet. Authorize the city manager or designees to finalize the terms and conditions and authorize the city manager to execute it on behalf of the city, provided it does not deviate substantially from the form approved by the city council today.
Second.
No, you don't need to. We've had our public comment. Thank you.
Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Henley?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-0.
Moving right along. So, city manager, you'll direct us?
Here, the next one is an action as the city and the successor agency to ratify the housing bond expenditure agreement in the form that is attached.
Do we have any?
I would like to make a motion, do I have to say on behalf of the city and the successor agency? To ratify the housing bond expenditure agreement in the attached in the form attached to the packet.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Henley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Okay, and the last item is also city and successor agency, the authorized manager to deliver a commitment letter for the tax credit application purposes to the commission and SAHA, confirming the amount of the bond proceeds approved, which would be the 1.48.
Well, looks like you're on a roll. Councilmember Hundley, you should just roll right through.
I'll do it.
Sounds good.
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager to deliver a commitment letter for tax credit application purposes to the commission and SAHA, confirming the amount of housing bond proceeds approved for the Altamira housing project.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0 with, thank you.
Great. Council, thank you, and I'd like to, congratulate the council on SAHA. This is making a big difference to continue the project that the community approved and the council approved to bring affordable housing to our community. I also like to thank council for, having an attorney on a cell phone. It may be a little different. Our redevelopment council is out of Southern California, and so, but I think it was helpful to have him on the phone. So thank you for help assisting with that, and thank you for SAHA as well.
Happy to do it.
Thanks, Bill.
Congratulations, Mr. Cooperman.
Point 2.
It's okay. This is discussion, consideration, and possible action on a request by the Blue Wing Adobe Trust for the adoption of a city council resolution supporting a matching grant application to the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District for the acquisition and preservation of the Castignaso Mission Bell Farm located at 196 East Spain Street, and authorizing the mayor to submit a letter of support.
Thank you, Mayor Agramonte, members of the City Council. I know we're all familiar with the Castignaso property, but just for the record, it's a 2.72 acre site located at the corner of East Spain Street and 2nd Street East. with development on the property consisting of a single-family residence constructed in 1890, 2 barns, and several outbuildings. The residents and the barns are each identified in the National Register of Historic Places as contributing buildings to the Sonoma Plaza National Landmark District. The bulk of the property is undeveloped and is used for light agricultural purposes, including the grazing of horses and a small vineyard. Over the years, the property has frequently been mentioned as a candidate for preservation, and it's listed among the acquisition priorities or preservation priorities of the city's open space preservation strategic plan. The Casagnaso family recently placed the property on the market, creating concerns that it might be sold for development, as the property has a zoning and general plan land use designation of medium density residential. This designation allows for densities of up to 12 units per acre. However, the Blue Wing Adobe Trust, a local nonprofit organization devoted to historic preservation, has developed a plan to acquire and preserve the property. And in fact, they have reached an agreement with the owners to purchase the property for $7 million, and the parties are currently in escrow. In order to complete the purchase, however, they have applied for a matching grant funding from the Sonoma County Agricultural and Preservation Open Space District. One of the required components of that application is a resolution from the local jurisdiction confirming its support for the request and making findings of general plan consistency. In staff's view, the preservation of the Casagnaso property would be consistent with the general plan, and again, it also reflects the priorities set forth in the Open Space Preservation Strategic Plan adopted by the City Council in 2005. So based on that assessment, we are recommending that the Council adopt the attached resolution supporting matching grant application to the Open Space District in the amount of $2.5 million for the acquisition and preservation of this site. Thank you.
Manager, I would like to open this up. Do we have any comments regarding this yet? Okay, none. So I'd like to open this up to public comment.
Patricia Cullinan, 425 Denmark. I'd like to thank the council for considering a resolution to support the Blue Wing Adobe Trust application to Ag and Open Space. I'd also like to introduce the board members of the Blue Wing Adobe Trust: Ned Forrest, Kelso Barnett, Will Honeyborn, and Dave Gould. The Blue Wing Adobe Trust has been working with California State Parks for 10 years to make the Blue Wing Inn once again a vibrant part of the community. We were successfully lobbying the state parks for a roof and seismic stabilization that was completed just prior to the Napa earthquake, something that most people don't realize. When confronted with the possible loss of the Mission Bell Farm across the street from the Blue Wing Inn, the Blue Wing Adobe Trust stepped forward, as we are uniquely qualified to preserve the farm as a contributor to our community character. We have only a short time to raise the funds to purchase the farm. To accomplish the goal of purchasing this significant and historical property, the Blue Wing Adobe Trust urgently needs the support of the community, both individuals and businesses. We have applied to Ag and Open Space for a conservation easement that will assure the land is preserved as a farm in perpetuity. We will also be requesting financial support from the City of Sonoma. The Blue Wing Adobe Trust is also working in partnership with the Sonoma Land Trust. However, the project will fail without additional funding from members of our local community. Again, I thank you very much for supporting us, and thank you.
Are there any other comments from the public? I'm sorry, my microphone was off.
So, yes, I'm part of the public. Will Honeyborn, 2nd Street East. I'd like to just add something, a little bit more information about the Ag and Open Space application. You see in the documents in front of you that we're applying for a grant for $2.5 million. The $2.5 million, well, as part of the process, there will be an appraisal done on the property, and we're in the process of getting that done. And that appraisal will appraise the value of the property and the value of the conservation easement. Until we have that value, we've been using an estimated value of $5 million. And that actually happens to be the amount that when this went up for a conservation easement in 2006, 2007, and then failed in 2010, the value that was placed on the easement at that time was $5 million. And just as a point of reference, 2.5 of that came from Ag and Open Space, 1.9 million came from the City of Sonoma, and 100 came from the owners in kind to upgrade the property. So that's where that number comes from. So we're applying for $2.5 million, and we're also told that the total amount that's available to anybody is $4 million. So we're applying for 2.5 out of 4 million, and we understand that we're one of 9 applicants. So it's pretty competitive. You know, we really need all of the support that we can get. And a motion unanimously adopted by this council would be sincerely appreciated. And just another thing is we need the public support. There's a petition that's up on the internet right now. It's been nearly a week. We have 1,300 signatures already, and it's climbing by the hour. And I can tell you from the comments that have come in, people of this town and our visitors feel very passionate about this particular property, not only for its historic value, but because it's the integral part of the charm, the character, the soul of our wonderful town. So thank you again for taking this resolution, and we hope that you adopt it unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honeyborn. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this issue? Having none, no one rising to the end, approaching the podium, I will close the public session and look to the council for any questions or comments. Do you have any questions? None?
I went with some of these fine public commenters to Ag and Open Space, and we discussed the project with them, and it's a great team that you guys have put together to lead this effort. And I know when the property was put up for sale, so many people were heartbroken at the thought that it wouldn't be a horse farm anymore. So I just wanted to thank you for all your hard work and being here and doing all the stuff you're doing. And anything I can do to support that, I'm happy to do it.
So when Ig Vela died, Milton Castagnasco and we were honorary pallbearers for Ig. So knew Milton for a long time, and his son Tony. So I'm in support of this. I know that we just did our budget. We don't have a lot of funding available from the city, but you know, I'll be in full support of moving this along with the other fundraising that's going on, the money for Sebastiani Theater, and several other projects that are happening as well. So, but I know this community will step up. I just don't know how much money the city will be able to provide, but because I know we're running pretty tight these days. But you know, it's been a treasure forever. The road used to flood across the way into where the Mission Square project, that for some reason that hasn't been built yet, but maybe that'll change some design on that as well. So look forward to supporting this.
And I will also be supporting this today, and I wanted to say thank you to all of you who have been working very hard. When the announcement came out, I was a little bit shocked and surprised about it. So I'm happy to support it today, and I'm also happy to help you in any way that I can.
So I actually think, thank you. I'm the last one that gets to comment. I think this is so wonderful. I can't tell you how appreciative I am of this move to try to save this area. So I'm certainly in support of that, and now I'm looking for I think a motion. We have a resolution. So if somebody would like to make a motion for the resolution.
I make a motion that we adopt a resolution supporting a matching grant application to the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District for the acquisition and preservation of the Castagnasco Mission Bell Farm located at 196 East Spain Street, and authorizing the mayor to submit a letter of support.
I will second that.
And may I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hunley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
The motion carries 4-0. Thank you.
So I think you're done with us.
Thank you.
For now.
Just started. We'll be back. Thank you.
now on to 7.3.
Discussion, direction, and possible action on adoption of a resolution approving the 6th contract amendment to the Sonoma Garbage Collectors Franchise Agreement, clarifying solid waste collection rate methodology and establishing rate review procedures.
Thank you. City Manager?
Yeah, Mayor Gramonte and council members. So as council's well aware, the city has had a franchise agreement with the Sonoma Garbage Collectors for some time. And as we approach looking at the rate review for this year, there were some issues that came up and that require some contract amendment changes. And so we wanted to bring that forward to you. And I will ask Mr. Abachi to kind of talk through some of those key points and give you an overview.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, staff's recommendation tonight is to adopt the resolution approving the 6th Amendment to the Sonoma Garbage Collectors contract with the city. The contract continues through 2027. Now, since 2007, the contract has referenced a refuse rate index of the County of Sonoma to determine when rates should be adjusted and how rates should be reviewed. The county no longer uses the rate index that the city has applied since 2007. This amendment would clarify the contract by inserting the very same rate index formula that the city has applied to the refuse rates since 2007. The formula takes cost categories and applies them to publicly verifiable indices such as the CPI for Bay Area consumers and landfill fee increases. As this is a formula, the amendment would subject Sonoma Garbage Company's rates to a verification process by SGC providing all the information necessary to confirm the accuracy of SGC's calculation by May 1st of each year. City staff would perform an administrative review of the information for new rates to take effect July 1st of that year. If the calculations are incorrect, the rates would be set in accordance with city staff's review. Staff would then place an informational item on the City Council agenda to inform the council and public of the new rates prior to them taking effect. This is the administrative review process that is included in the amendment and as being recommended to the council. However, if under the formula, the rates would increase more than 6% above the current rates in effect, then to ensure accountability and transparency, a public hearing would be held with notice given in advance to all property owners of the proposed rate increase. The hearing process would be in accordance with procedures for property-related charges under Proposition 218. And alternatively, to the hearing process, Sonoma Garbage Collectors could choose to implement no more than a 6% increase instead. It is important to note that during the last 10 years, as I mentioned, since 2007, this very same formula has been used. During the last 10 years, there's only been 1 year that the increase has been more than that 6% threshold, and that was actually the very first year in 2007. The collector, Sonoma Garbage Collectors, has reviewed and agreed upon all of these amendments. If the council approves the amendments, there would be an increase under this same formula of 4.37% for the period from July 1 of 2018 through June 30th of 2019, as is shown in Table 1 of your materials. Ken Wells, Sonoma Garbage Collectors representative, is also here to answer any questions that the council may have. That completes my staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Any questions right now? Mr. Wells, you want to approach the podium?
Good evening, council members, Mayor. Ken Wells, representing Sonoma Garbage Collectors. I think the attorney did an excellent summary of the approach here. Perhaps even a simpler method is that we are formalizing the process we've followed for the last 10 years, and we're putting it into contract. In the past, one distinction here is that in the past, however, city staff has done some of those calculations that we're referring to. Going forward, Sonoma Garbage Collectors and its support will provide that for their review rather than having, so that will actually do some savings on the staff's time. So I think other than that, we're here to answer any questions, continue to serve the community.
Does anyone from the council have any questions? So I have to close. Do we have anyone from the public who would like to speak? Having no one, I'll close the session, public session.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution approving the Sixth Amendment to contract and authorize the city manager to execute the amendment.
Second.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hunley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington? Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
So where are we now? We're done. At this point, do any of our council members have any comments or reports?
Very briefly, I had a meeting of the mayors and council members legislative committee last Friday. And one of the interesting things that was discussed is that Assemblyman Wood is running a bill specifically for Santa Rosa to help them. They're forming an enterprise district downtown to help get funding to build tall apartments. They're going above 10 stories. And as a part of this, related to the fires but not in the burn areas, but also acknowledging that they haven't been keeping up with their housing development. The bill that Assemblyman Wood is doing for them is going to relax several CEQA-related provisions, and they're working with the government to use this all as a big experiment, because this might be the future of redevelopment if it works out.
Now it explains why they dropped the housing bond for the county. Now I understand. So that makes it very clear. And I think it's probably a good thing for Santa Rosa, obviously, since they had such tremendous damage. But I'm pleased that the housing bond is gone for the whole county, because we had no guarantee what would happen for us.
Well, just a Sonoma Clean Power update. It's not finalized yet, but it looks like we had set aside $1 million for fire victims, and out of those funds, so far the Ecology Center has gotten $50,000 just in the valley. The Ecology Center got $50,000 for projects related to post-fire cleanup, but it looks like the Mentoring Alliance, KSVY, and also the Community Center are also going to get grants to help kids and adults that were, suffered trauma due to the fires. So that's coming, and when the amounts are finalized, I'll let you know. But I think each of those, they all applied for grants, and they should all be getting something.
Just very briefly, so as you all know, we're going to be having a little experiment of our own using sheep to help do some of the fire abatement out on Montini Preserve. They're supposed to be coming this week. Looks like it'll be next week. It's kind of too hot to transport them with the weather right now, but that'll be. I think that's going to be a great opportunity for us all. And then staff is already mowed and kind of taken care of. So again, and I know the fire department is actively, their fire abatement letters have gone out, and they're following up with individual property owners. So I just want council and community to know that there is definitely active work as we approach the fire season occurring. And also we are putting our youth position for the CSCC back out and encouraging folks, so we'll be reopening that. We did not get any applicants so far, so we'll put it back out and see if we can get some folks. So please help spread the word on that. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. And before we adjourn, I'd like to remind everyone I dedicated this evening to Dick Grunt, a very dedicated teacher here in the Valley who passed away. So at this point, I would like to adjourn the meeting.